Hello and welcome back to Visual Analytics. Today we're going to start talking about module number 2, and I'm going to do a little bit review, and then we're going to introduce the new tool, and we're going to talk about the structure of the language. But I want to start with a basic, and if I will use the textbook definitions, he said visual analytics combines automated techniques with interactive visualization for efficient understanding, reasoning, and decision making based on a very large complex data sets. So we will try to see how can we communicate with regard to visual analytics, and we will look today at one of the first tools that came out by Google called Google Fusion Table. And I will illustrate it in PowerPoint. There was some trouble with Google Fusion when I tried that. If you will encounter problems, please let me know. Sometimes it happens. It is taking the data set and generate a visualization or map on it. So sometimes it can happen, but majority of the time, Google Fusion is a reliable source. So what do we need to talk about when we are talking about structure? In compared to language, when we have the alphabetical words, and we have we learn throughout school how to create a sentence, how to create a paragraph, how to create an essay. We read a lot of books. In comparison into visualization, yes, we see a lot of visualization, but no one taught us what is the basic structure of visualization. So according to Professor Tovey, which I hope that you learn about the visual display of quantitative information, he talks about the basic structure. It consists of points, lines, coordinate system, numbers, symbols, words, shading, and color. I will talk more about color theory next module, but I want you to keep in that mind, because this is where we are going to compose or to create our visualization. This is the main texture that we are allowed to do that. So point is the basic structure. This is where we start, and this is where the most basic element in visual analytics has to consist of. And so the next thing is line, and a line make up from points. So points make a line if you look at very closely. And the lines can tell us a lot about the symbolic language and how can we communicate emotion or show what is the data actually looks like. And so if I combine lines and points, as you can see, I am starting to tell a storyline. And so basically the lines with the points can give you some understanding how to tell a story out of the data. The next thing that we need to talk about is the circles. Circles is also part of the visual language or the visual framework that we tell the story. And text, of course, but we are not allowed to put the entire text on the visual. So the text is just giving us signs so the reader, outside reader, will be able to understand better what it is. I will use it in my own example in this PowerPoint to make a point between one graph to another. So I will use the text, I will use numbers, and you will see the difference. One of the things that often used in arts is patterns in the background, and we will talk about that when we are going to cover Gestalt rules. What does it mean tell? How will we apply patterns in order for us to display? As I said, I'm going to talk more about colors in next module, about the color theory. But there is also the issue of brightness, and brightness is part of colors theory, and using brightness to capture the attention of the viewer is part of what we are aiming to do. So again, this is a really important subject, and I will talk it throughout the semester, but next time I will talk about colors. So let's start with basic visual chart format. Some of you are very familiar, some of you are not, but bar, line, and pie and scatter plots are the most common platform of visual analytics. Bar is the simplest way. It is the most common, and usually it allowed us, and this is one of the things that is often been discussed, it allowed us to display a single variable data. And an example, in this case, the quality of coffee I drink a day. And so this is based on a daily, a weekly, a monthly, and so on. Again, this is how you measure things, and with regard to coffee. Another way to do that is to use line graph. And line graph is the plotting based on two elements, the data or time versus the degree. And so in this case, I'm able to display two variables with regard to that dimension and to show how it progresses through time and with regard to increase or decrease with that particular variable. And this is the beauty of it. We use a grid to display that, and this is why the line graph is considered to be more scientific by its nature. So this grid is also called coordinate grid, and it is used basically to display the y-axis and the x-axis and the horizontal and vertical axis, and by using it you have a starting point of 0.0. So this is where the x and y meets, and why many academic or scientific journals or academics like to use this grid to represent the visualization, because they see that this is the starting point where they tell the eye where to look at when you are trying to display the visual distribution of the data. So this is a good reminder ourselves that why is it so important to use a grid. Another platform that is another form of visualization that is very popular is a pie chart, and it is usually about distribution, and again you have to be very specific on how to display it and how to show it, and again it is a very common way to do that. But again, as I said beforehand in module number 1, there's a lot of problems with regard people not displaying the honest type of data in the pie, and there is a lot of example of it. Another form of that is very popular is the scatter plot, and it again showing a relationship between different data sets. And again, in this case is one set, but if I will add another grid of data into it, again I can show the grid behind it, I can show different colors, and by doing that I will be able to make a distinction between the relationship between one set to another. So as I said in the beginning of in module number 1, I do not like Excel. I really don't like Excel. And why do I don't like Excel? So I can give you example of what Excel does not allow us to do. It doesn't allow us to do bubble chart. It doesn't allow us to do ring chart. It doesn't like us to do distribution maps or even heat maps. So this is why in particular element is why Excel does not display a good representation. What can we do with the visualization? And when you said to a painter, you're not allowed to use specific format, probably the artist will say, I don't like to do this type of work because I'm limited. So that's how I feel about Excel. It limits my ability to display more visualization and more ability to display more creativity display of the data. So bubble chart is again the way for us to display the data based on a grid and display it in dimensions, which means that I can verify size, color, texture of the data to show you dimensions and show you the grid behind it in order for you to better understand why is the data so complex or what is the patterns that I can find throughout the data. Another way to display data, which again Excel does not allow us to do, is ring chart. And it is that big advantage of ring chart is that allowed us to compare similar data set. So if I have a large data set and I want to show the distribution of those variables into colors, the ring chart is a very nice way to do that. It has a very aesthetic and pleasant way to do that. But in the end of the day, visual analytics is all about statistics. And what is statistics? And to some of you who did not take the advanced statistics class, we talked about that statistics is the science of collecting and distribution and interpretation of data. And we often in every statistical class, a basic statistical class, we are talking about descriptive and inferential statistics. The descriptive statistics is about the entire population versus the inferential statistics is about taking a sample out of the data that the sample represent the population in order for us to make a conclusion. An example of descriptive statistics is the score of the GRE when they are trying to test it on high school senior and to see what the score is and what they can learn about that when they are going to give it to the GRE to the students who graduate the undergrad degree. And so again, this is a way for them to measure that. They do it on the entire population and it's over 10 years, so they take the entire set. But in this set, we are trying to come up with a way for us not to examine the entire population, but to take a sample. A sample needs to represent the entire population. So in every population or a sample, we have some criteria how to do that. We have a data set where in population it's we are talking about a value, and in a sample this value has to represent the entire population, the experiment that we are taking, and we have different terminology to descriptive statistics and the statistics that measure the sample data. And in this example, the dean of a college was interested to learn the average age of a faculty. So he took a sample out of the data from the faculty because he has a large number of faculty. So he took a sample that represents the entire faculty and he tried to measure that in order for him to understand why or what is the age of the faculty. Our textbook talk about two types of category of data. I am going to focus on categorical versus numerical variable. Categorical is about category. To categorize, such as age is a category, such as race is a category. Compared to numerical variable, that is about the number that represent. So the idea here is that both type of categories help us to understand the data by allowing us to classify the data based on its type of variable it represents. So I gave you an example here of identify the sample as attributes, as a qualitative versus quantitative. Categorical is considered to be qualitative versus numerical, which is considered to be quantitative. And in this case, the amount of gasoline pumped by the next 10 customers is numerical, because we can measure the amount of gasoline each of the 10 customers actually purchased. And so again, this is how we do that. And again, I want you to understand how we are applying that. But I want to go back to our thinking, and this is why we are here to learn about visual analytics. We are thinking through our eyes. And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, there was time that my parents put me in front of the TV and was hoping that I would be quiet. So I was thinking through my eyes by watching TV. So according to our textbook, 70% of our body sensor go through our eyes. So we need to have some thought of sight in order for us to do that. So the human visual system is a pattern of thinking and the ability to have a sense of what the knowledge is, according to Coyne, where that I outline his definition of visual analytics. So again, our textbook gives us example that is compared to table versus the visual display. And in the table, it's more concise. It gives us the month, it gives us men versus women, versus in this case, men versus women. It doesn't show us example who is the man, who is the woman. It doesn't show us exactly, it doesn't portray exactly what does it entail, and it is not correct. So in this case, according to our textbook, the table works better. I will argue throughout the semester that if we are portraying the visual, we can display it more correctly. And if we will do that, we will not perceive, we will not lie to the viewer who uses it. So how visual perception works? We see things through our eyes. We have the actual images, but we see, and what we see goes through our brain, and our brain has perception. We think about, for example, if we see candy, we think of it as sweet. So he gives us interpretation of what we see to the final image that we have in our brain, and when we describe the image that we see or the object that we see, this is the final image. The brain processes what we see and give us the final product. But we have a lot of things that we need to be aware when we are thinking about images. Example, the figure itself and the background. Example, in figure A, there is no distinction between a clear definition between the figure and the background, in compared to B, where the figure is highlighted with a simple line in order for you to make the distinction. You see the figure more correctly, or more it stands out more clearly. And by doing that, we are able to distinction or make the distinction. What about ambiguous art pieces that usually play with ambiguous images in order for them to do that? Dali was the mastermind behind those images. And if you are not familiar, I recommend you to do search on Dali's images and to see how he plays with ambiguous images. We can also see there's a lot of things that the art usually leave behind for us to decide. In this picture, a picture of young or old woman, and we do not know exactly if she is young or old. And by doing that, we are starting to collect information and perceive information that we otherwise do not understand. In order for us to understand that, there is a Gestalt rule, or in German it's called pattern. And the idea is to perceive patterns or to recognize patterns that we often find in visual art or in visual analytics. And the idea behind this Gestalt rule is the law of simplicity. The objective is that you can make your visual analytics more simplified in order for you to communicate correctly. And this is something that our textbook do not talk about. It doesn't talk about how can we make the visual more simplistic in order for us to communicate more accurately what does it entail. One of the terms that the Gestalt rules talks about is proximity. The result is that we need to make sure that the best way to emphasize relationship between different data set will take approximately in the same size or the same distance between one another. So example, this is example, and again the example with the A and B, it shows that in this example it's more accurate, it's more closely compared to the other example into the right. And so again, distance is an important aspect. Similarity with regard to the shape and color is another, and it is ruled that related visual elements should look similar. And in this example, A versus B, you see that, and by doing that, you are helping the user to understand the visual aspect. There is also the idea of connection, to show connection between a relationship. And this is something that again is important, and we will talk about that throughout the semester and how to make it more coherent. Example, the example of ABC, and what is the connection and how the connection makes sense with regard to the visual display. And another example, which one is more connected to one another? Is it A, B, C, or D? And those are the elements that we can play with the design to make our point clear to the viewer. Another way for us to do that, to emphasize the relationship between the design elements. And those are the use of the idea of showing one versus the other one. And again, this is the idea behind it. And showing that similarity or differences will help the user in the end of the day to understand our visual display. The closure is another way for us to do that. And we will talk about that more and more, and you will read about that more and more. And again, there's rules of how to apply that. There's rule how to emphasize that. And again, the closure, which one you see closure better? The example in A or example in B? For me, it's the A. If you ask the one who selected B, again, I will not debate with you, but the study shows that A has closure than the B figure. Relative size is another way for us to display object or to design aspect, and how to apply that. Figure and ground, we talked about that, and again, the background is really important, and how to emphasize the background to supplement the foreground is important, and we will talk about that, how to apply that, how to create a more overall impression that visualization as a story to tell, and all the elements in the visual display is coherent, will help the user to understand what we are trying to do, to tell the story more coherent. Transparency is another one. I hope that you will apply that rules and you will go over that, and you're going to read about that, and I hope you will understand better than my 5-second display of this idea. But again, when you think about that, it's a good idea to show the consistency and the color correspondence that exists in order for us to do that. Overlap is another way. And again, all those elements are important. Pattern in motion is another way for us to do that. And attributes of the motion is important. Form and counter in the motion is another way. So there's a lot of rules that we can apply. I will not ask for you to apply all the rules. I just want you to remember there is rules that we can apply. Not all the visualization follow those rules, but I want you to become aware that even though visual has no grammar that we are accustomed to see in English, that we have to write the correct form of English in the right way, grammar has rules. Do we follow all of them? Not all the time, but we have the idea of how to generate a more concise way. Causality is another way to us to show the contrast between one to another. And you can use specific motion to encode causal relationship in the data. So again, the black figure versus the white figure. I'm sure that the white figure is much more concise and showed the causality in compared to the black figure. Animation, we will learn animation with using open source R, and we will learn about that. So studies have shown again and again that we are very keen towards animation because of our heritage of TV as a source of information. We like to see things in motion in order for us to believe it more. So again, this is something that we will need to do. 4 dimensions or figures is also a very stylish way. Our books do not like it. He does not like 3D or 4D animation figures. And again, he has a good point to make that those is sometimes hard to figure. Again, the issue of principles of how to do repetition with regard to visual elements, to show that is a good principle, but it is not required, but it is recommended. He shows a little bit about attributes of good design. He talks about the form, the color, the position, the motion, and this is from his page on page 39. And he shows the pre-attributes that goes with that. And so how to make things better, how to position it better, how to not use blur and clarity is better, darkness versus light. Again, those things I hope that will give you building blocks of how to use visualization in order for you to understand how to apply that. I'm going to stop here because I'm going to start talking about the second subject of our class, and it is geographic maps. All of us know how to read maps, I hope, and the idea of a map is to give us direction to get to the right place. So what is geographical maps? It is information or data about location. And usually we putting together human and physical characters of the location. So it is the activities and condition of human who live there that makes those maps more accessible to us. And especially when we are talking about our cell phone, we are having nowadays more advanced maps that help us see things clear. So we are looking for patterns in the maps, we are looking at relations, we are looking at connection within geographical information. And so we are using data, we are using text, we are using graphs, and we are using also images in order for us to show the patterns in it. One of the basic tools that often been used is the Google Fusion table. It provides data management service that's accessible over the internet. So you need to use the browser. I recommend to use a browser, not IE, but use the Google browser or or any other browser. But again, be careful, because Google is very keen about using their own products. So this is the idea of the Fusion table. It allowed us to do search in it, allowed us to, you need to have Google Drive account in Google Drive, which I believe you do, because all your documents are nowadays stored in Google Drive, and you're going to use it based on a map or an idea. So you're going to have, example, the table of Florida libraries created in Google Drive. He will give you the library name, he will give you the address, he will give you the zip code if the data set exists, and he will give us the phone numbers. In order for you to create the map, you will need to use the address as the way for you to implement, in order for you to create something like that. So you're going to capture that, and this is you're going to be your first assignment. So how do you create a Fusion table? Let's go to idea. So first of all, you need that your browser will recognize that you have a Fusion table. So in this case, you're going to type, and if you do not have in your Google Drive a Fusion table, you're going to ask to connect more apps. You're going to say, I want Google Fusion table, and he will search, and he will apply, and you're going to say connect, and he will connect you to Google Fusion. And by doing that, you're going to open your first page. And the first page that you're going to do is, do you want to search using the Google Fusion? Do you want to search your own computer, or use Google spreadsheet, or use empty table? You're going to skip that, and you're going to type in the search public tables. You're going to search, for example, public libraries, or public records, or anything that is of interest to you. In my previous class in the area, I asked the students, some of the students search, for example, Animal House, or public university in Florida or in Tennessee, or colleges, or private or public university. So it will give you a list of names, as I showed you beforehand, with the address. You're going to change the settings, and you're going to allow that the change of the columns will consist of data. So in this case, I will give you a video that will show from Google that create how to use Google Fusion, that will go through step by step how to do that. And in the end, it will give you a map that shows you something like that. So this is the end. You're going to capture that, and you're going to post it, and you're going to assign what does it entail, and you're going to tell what is the story that you try to tell, and you're going to post it on your blog. So this is the first assignment. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you will learn something about that. I hope that Google, the Fusion table will be easy for you to access. Until next time, I hope you enjoy it. Have fun.